All right, let's tiptoe into what pluralism is. Of course, we're going to look at the one side of pluralism and the opposite side of pluralism as we move through these modules, like we did with inclusivism. And so the beginning of this model is starts with a man by the name of John Hick. And John Hick is a philosopher, primarily spent his career in the United States, but he's a British citizen and philosopher. And what he perpetuates is a concept of mutuality in pluralism. And so we're going to discover what that actually means. If someone wants to study religious pluralism, the place that they start is the work of John Hick. John Hick is discussed in all pluralisms and is the major figure within pluralism, at least religious pluralism. And at at one end, people see him as the essential model for pluralism, and at the other end, there are people who have argued that he isn't perpetuating pluralism. And so we'll have to explore all of these different ideas. But the first thing is to get our minds around what is pluralism. And so the most basic argument for pluralism is that you should believe in a variety of religious traditions, or excuse me, a variety of religious traditions offer access to salvation and religious truth. So this definition is in opposition to exclusivism and especially parts of inclusivism. And so there's one major model that represents this, and it can be seen through this little example on the right-hand side is there's a mountain and all paths lead to the top of that mountain. And this is what the mutuality model is that there is one God or one goal or one reality, however you want to phrase it, or a singular end or purpose. So imagine the mountain, and the purpose is to get to the top of the mountain. And you can describe that differently if you want, but ultimately there is one real, ultimate real. And so in the mutuality model, all religions are aimed at and have the potential to meet the same end. And we are all climbing the same mountain with the potential to meet at the top. And so the reason it's called the mutuality one is because there is one reality and we will mutually come to that end. And so religions all have their, even though they describe it differently, they all have the possibility of getting to the top of the mountain. And so that is your model for the mutuality model. So keep that in mind as we move through these ideas of John Hick's. So when it comes to moving from inclusivism to pluralism, many theologians of religious diversity make the argument that there is a bridge that moves from inclusivism to pluralism, and they call this the crossing of the Rubicon, which is an idiom for there's no turning back. So Caesar crossed the Rubicon, and it started Caesar's civil war, and eventually Caesar becomes the emperor, and that was the end. There's no turning back. And so they phrase this as there's no turning back. This is the moment where you will realize and move into the ultimate possibility of pluralism. And so in this case, there isn't just one bridge. The crossing of the Rubicon comes through three separate bridges. And these bridges can be crossed at the same time or individually, but ultimately you see these three bridges crossing. And so the first one, which is the philosophical historical bridge, is John Hick's model, and we'll cover that in this module. And in that module, or in that bridge, you're crossing the bridge using the historical limitations of religions. So can they all claim to know absolutely? Also, is there a historical origin that overlaps and causes a kind of connectedness between these religions? But then on the other hand, there's this philosophical possibility that there is one divine reality behind and within all of them. So the beginning of this, the first bridge, is this important John Hick model of the mountain. There's all these paths leading to the same top of the mountain. And so this is different than inclusivism, and it definitely has a pluralistic feel to it. But you can see why it's the first bridge. One might actually argue that John Hick's model might be right on the border of inclusivism and pluralism. The second bridge is the religious mystical bridge. So this bridge is held up by what many religious people would agree upon, and that is that the divine is both more than anything experienced by one religion, and yet present in the mystical experience of them all. So God is not, because God isn't here, the experience of God will always be mediated by our human experience. And yet, it's hard to deny that God is inside of all those experiences. And so there's that next bridge. The third bridge is the ethical practical bridge. Like all religions seem to perpetuate a concept of being good and doing good. And while that fails at times, like putting together these religions as, um, in the end, perpetuating the good in the world, creates a space in which this bridge must be crossed together. This is the way that the religious ends will actually be uh, achieved. And so let's look at each of these. Well, in this module, we'll just look at the first one, John Hick's model. While the mountain metaphor of everybody reaching the same peak is what usually gets applied to the John Hick's model, it's not actually the metaphor or analogy that he uses to explain his model of pluralism. He actually uses the solar system. And in this solar system, it's a pretty simple model, but you can explain it and make it deeper and move towards more specific points. But in the center, like he calls it a Copernican revolution. In exclusivism and inclusivism, there is a geocentric solar system. So it's pre-Copernican. At the center of every universe is each person's religion. And so this would be like the earth is the center of the universe, and the earth as Christianity, all other religions circulate around the true, the one, the only religion. So Hick wants this Copernican religion, or this Copernican turn and revolution, to realize that at the center of the universe is the sun, and that sun is ultimate reality. And we're all circling around that ultimate reality, and pointing towards and have the gravitational pull of the ultimate reality with just different distances from the ultimate reality. And those distances still draw us to circulate the solar system, and be caught in that specific route around ultimate reality, but nonetheless still being part of ultimate reality and connecting ourselves directly to it. So you can see how John Hick's model, going from the geocentric model to the Copernican revolution, marks the line in the sand for John Hick that this is not inclusivism and it is not exclusivism. So that's John Hick's central claim. So that there is an ultimate divine reality, and that everybody has access to or is connected to. So religions have emerged and developed in time and place as reactions to experience of the ultimate divine reality. We'll unpack this a little bit more and show another analogy. So Hinduism began in India. The Nation of Islam began in the United States. And so you can see they developed in a specific time and place, and they're reacting to the divine reality that they've discovered. Interpretations of the ultimate divine reality begin build on each other and respond to cultures and languages. So, for example, ancient Vedic Indians experienced the ultimate divine. This is like the oldest version of religion that we have direct access to through these Vedic texts. And so they experienced the ultimate reality in those ancient terms. So, with that basic idea that there are historical contextual religions, they emerge in a specific time and place. Um, that being said, now you need a philosophical founding for the fact that there is one divine reality. And so John Hick uses a specific German philosopher named Immanuel Kant. And Immanuel Kant is he's this philosopher who realizes as science starts to emerge, you have these things on the outside, objects outside of yourself that seem to be giving off what they are, and the human being is capturing those things. He actually flips that relationship around and he says, do I really have access to that cup? Or do I have access to me thinking about that cup? And so all of your sensual experiences are actually thought comes before them. And so he begins to realize that all he really has access to is the phenomenon, so how it occurs to him. So we experience the cup as it appears in our mind. But we cannot experience the cup in itself. So Kant is also considered a kind of Copernican revolution in philosophy for the modern world, flipping that relationship around and asking the question of whether we have access to the cup. It begins to be the obsession of modern philosophy. So the experience of something is what we have access to. That's with a cup or the common day realities, but also with religion. What we have access to is the experience of God, not necessarily God. What we have that is for sure and we can always trust and rely upon is the experiences that we actually have. That's what we actually have access to. And so now, instead of analyzing God, we analyze our experience of God. And so now a Hindu in Calcutta experiences God from a historical contextual viewpoint, whereas a Mormon from Orem, Utah experiences God. They both have different languages, they both have different cultures, but they both have that moment of them reaching for God and having the experience of God in their very different lives. So this is a sense of how people approximate God. In religion, you're always approximating. You have a certain experience, a certain revelation, but it's never actually the complete thing. We never have access of the thing in itself, like the cup or God. What we have access to is the revelation that God gave us, and our experience of that particular revelation. So the real remains the final referent of the ontological being claims made by the different religious traditions. And so this would be, so even though such claims can at best only partially approximate the real truth of divine reality. So the Indian in Calcutta, the Hindu, who worships Shiva, um, has had a specific experience. And that experience, the experience of God, is full to them, yet the entirety of access of God is always just an approximation. There's always missing pieces. So for Hick, this all goes back to this concept of religious knowledge and access to knowledge, and the experience of individuals, the phenomenon being primary. And so as you have these historical experiences of the ultimate reality. Some of them are personal, and then some of them are non-personal. And this is where you get this overlap and expression of each religion. So the persona of the real, Hick understands the personal deities of those traditions that posit them. So, for example, you have Jesus and Yahweh and Vishnu and Amida. So the persona invoking the connotation of the theatrical mask of the Latin word persona. And so here, in this case, you might imagine God or the personal deity emerging as a specific person. This actually happens very clearly in expressions and depictions of Jesus, for example. You have like many Westerners always painting Jesus as European instead of Middle Eastern, instead of Jewish, they depict him as if he was British or Northern European. And then you also have depictions of Jesus that find themselves into South America or Asia that depict them as particularly ethnic personas of that real deity to them. That's a good example of what he's saying. And then on the other hand, you have concepts such as Brahma, Nirvana, and the Tao that represent the ultimate reality in a non-personal way. So this actually helps, and Hick, this is pretty clever for Hick to breach the differences, right? The difference between a non divine religion like there's no creator God in Buddhism to the ultimate creator God in Hinduism, Brahma. How do you bridge the gap between the real when the real is a concept like nirvana or enlightenment versus the very individual gods? And this is the way he does it. It actually makes a lot of sense here in the way that he's done this. So since the ideas in both these categories, personal and impersonal, arise from our experience of phenomenal reality, so the experiences that we have are real, we've had them and we have them, none of them can adequately describe the real as it is in itself. So the Kantian terms, right, in Kantian terms here again, the only way that humans can describe the real directly is by using formal language such as ultimate truth or the ground of experience. And so now you have this language in which pluralism could function, where there is an ultimate truth, and each person's ultimate truth is and should be described explicitly from their particular viewpoint. A Hindu who believes in Vishnu should not express those in terms of Jesus, whereas a Christian should embrace the Christian teachings and all of the ways that they're articulated. And that is the best way to express the ultimate truth. And within both of those experiences, for the Hindu and the Christian, that is the ground of all experience, pointing towards the ultimate truth. So I think that's been articulated well enough, but let me just reemphasize it with a final analogy. In science, you put white light into a prism, and when it comes out, it splits the lights together. So inside of the white light was all of the rainbow. The rainbow colors were all combined into the white light, and you go into the historical prism, and it separates them into individual colors of the rainbow. And so the real can be seen as that white light, and the prism can be seen as the historical context, time and place, and it divides the white light into Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity, or the religions is what they represent. And so those religions are in fact coming from the same space and are the expressions of it. And so now, if you turn the mountain model on its side, they're all going up in individual historical experiences that can be combined back to the white light at the top of the mountain. And so Hick advances the view that meaning is constituted largely by practice, that is, linguistic and historical time-space realities within the context of particular cultures. And so this is a good way of thinking about this the white light into a prism and the dividing into the rainbow of religions. So if you remember the Rubicon, right? So moving across the Rubicon, um, the difference between inclusivism and pluralism. So the first idea that I brought forth was that that division for John Hick was going from a heliocentric, where one religion is the Earth and all other planets circulated around the Earth, to a Copernican revolution in which planets circulate the sun and the sun is the ultimate reality. The heliocentric model is inclusivism and exclusivism. And Hick's model of pluralism is that first bridge. We're crossing the Rubicon. So let's just do a little comparison so you can see some of the advantages of Hick's model. So the anti-realism of religion, or this anti-religion, a naturalistic point of view, versus exclusivism, and then Hick's pluralistic hypothesis. So in the anti-realism one, all religions are false, all encompassing naturalistic explanations. And then in exclusivism, only one is true. So if it were so, could you know for certain is the big question. So in this exclusivism, all are false except for one. So these claims of negativity. Whereas then you look at the more positive, open response from Hick. He says all religious experience reflects an ultimate real from each of their perspectives. Okay, so that's one point. The second point is in anti-realism of religion, they discount all claims of God and spiritual experience. So the naturalistic point of view says, well, it's impossible that you saw an angel or the Spirit spoke to you. In exclusivism, this is still a kind of anti-theism, exclusivism, just like this naturalistic point of view. It discounts all claims of God except their own experience, right? Any experience that happens is only valid if it is through the one religion. Both of these are a kind of atheism. This is an ultimate atheism, there is no God. This is an atheism of all other people's gods. This is still atheism. Um, on this one, so it take all claims as contextually true that points to the real, accept religious experience as valid. So in Hick's point of view, you have to be open to the possibility of each of them, each of the experiences pointing towards the top of the mountain. So the very last one, okay, so we have claims of knowledge, we have religious experience, and then the last one, all religions are a contradiction of nature, science, and the real. All religions contradict the one true religion. You're getting this point here where to be an exclusivist, you have to be a kind of atheist, a kind of person that disregards God to some extent, except for your version. And so Hick argues that religions do not contradict each other. They are genuine expressions of religious experience from a specific time and place. They support each other historically too. So Hinduism starts with a Vedic religion, it moves and expands into an Upanishadic version, and eventually, you have these various religions that are part of it, but they have historical roots in Vedic religion. This is similar in Abrahamic religions. So you have Abrahamic religions that eventually move into Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, but they have these same historical roots. Um, and so, with this idea, the contradiction of each other has to be an explicit disregard for someone's religious experience. But instead, Hick offers them the possibility of describing their own experience as valid. And now you have all these paths going up the mountain to the ultimate reality at the top of the peak.